You're listening to episode 986 of the Father Bill's podcast. Welcome back. This is a special episode for me personally, as it was part of the celebration of the Mass, which included the commemoration of my 25th anniversary of ordination to the priesthood. My actual anniversary date is July 1, though this didn't happen on that date. We had to push it off a couple of weeks just due to logistics. So the homily itself was offered by Monsignor Rick Paperini, who was my spiritual director and then later formation director at Mount Angel Seminary, and during the days of my studies at Mount Angel for the priesthood. The homily is entitled, Who is Worthy?, given on the 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2025.
Father Bill, Father Bill's family, parishioners of all these many parishes, good morning. We gather here today to celebrate the Paschal Mystery, that is, the life, death, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the ordination of our brother William Holtzinger. I'm honored to be here to preach on this occasion, and am frankly a little surprised that I was asked. I met Father Bill, he says 32 years ago, I have 30 years ago here, but I met him some 32 years ago at Mount Angel Seminary. As he said, I served as his spiritual director, formation director, and also his teacher. However, after his ordination, I'm sorry to say, I lost touch with Bill and only saw him at the rare priest meeting. Since his move to Holy Trinity and my move to the home, St. John Vianney, where old priests go to get ready for heaven, I have seen him a bit more frequently, and it's been my delight. More about him at the end of this homily. As Bill said, I am Rick Paperini, a retired priest of the Archdiocese, and as I used to tell my students, it is the first obligation of the priest to preach the gospel. So please give me a few minutes today to do just that. In our gospel today, a lawyer put Jesus to the test with this question, Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus turned the question back to the lawyer. What's written in the law? How do you read it? The lawyer answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And you love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said to him, You've answered correctly. Do this and you'll live. There it is, the simplest formula for the good life ever given from the lips of the Master. Love God and love your neighbor, and you'll live. Doctors know it's true. Love for God and one's neighbor is one of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself. Time after time, it's been proven. Men and women who keep to themselves, even those in good physical health, are more likely to die prematurely than those who live lives that are linked to others. Even more impressive are studies that show we benefit physically and emotionally from helping the less fortunate. The pleasure one receives from such an activity often adds more to the inner quality of the helper than it does to the one who's helped. Surely everyone in this church is aware of how rewarding it is to help someone who cannot help him or herself. We know how much joy we have received when we have gone out of our way to help somebody in need. Why then don't we live out our love for God and our love for neighbor on a daily basis? That is the question. Why don't we do it? Now, I am well aware that the people of Holy Trinity Parish are deeply involved in many acts of charity and good works, and your pastor could stand here and list them off. But this homily may be a wake-up call for those who could be more involved in the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Is it not true that there is something within us, though, that rebels against doing the very thing that would bring us the most joy? That's a story as old as the Garden of Eden. Even when we know the key to life, we can tend to resist it. In my previous life, before priesthood, I taught high school, and I taught literature out at Reynolds High School. And there was a book by Albert Camus, an existentialist author, called The Fall. Now, in this book, there's one scene where there's a respectable lawyer, and this lawyer is walking the streets of Amsterdam, and one night he hears a cry. A woman has fallen into the canal and is crying for help. Then the thoughts come rushing toward his mind. Of course he must help, but a respected lawyer getting involved in this way? What would be the implications? What about personal danger? After all, who knows what's been going on? By the time the lawyer has thought it all through, it's too late. She has drowned. He moves on, making all kinds of excuses to justify his actions. Camus writes, "He did not answer the cry for help. That was the kind of man he was." We would have done better, would we have not? We tell ourselves that. And yet all around us are people in need. Not just physical needs. Emotional needs can be more devastating than physical needs. The most serious problem in America today, according to many experts, is loneliness. Many of us could hear cries for help right in our own neighborhoods, in our own families, in our own parish, if we would just listen. Do we listen? I have a very dear friend, and he often asks my opinion on things. And one day he did just that, and he said, "Rick, what do you think of this?" And I told him. Now, I admit sometimes I go on for a while, but nonetheless, I told him. And at the end, I said to him, "Now, what do you think of that?" And he looked at me and he said, "I don't know, I wasn't listening." Why do we not listen to each other? "Do this and you will live," said Jesus. We love our neighbor because Christ loved us first. The lawyer who asked Jesus about the great commandment wanted clarification. "And who is my neighbor?" he asked. At this point, Jesus told him a parable all of us know by heart, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Each of us, at some time or another, has identified with that priest or that Levite who passed by on the other side. Or perhaps in our better moments, we identified with the Samaritan himself, who ministered to the man who had been beaten and robbed beside the road. Or maybe we have discovered that it is Christ himself who has been the Samaritan, binding up our broken hearts and lives. A man from India, whom I suspect many of you, if not all of you, have never heard of, is worth mentioning today. VP Menon was a significant political figure in India during its struggle for our independence from Britain after World War II. Menon had a splendid reputation for personal charity. His daughter explained the background of this trait after he died. When Menon arrived in Delhi to seek a job in government, all of his possessions, including his money and ID, were stolen at the railway station. He would have to return home on foot, defeated. In desperation, he turned to an elderly man he saw standing there, explained his troubles, and asked for a temporary loan of 15 rupees to tide him over until he could get a job. The man gave him the money. When Menon asked for his address so that he could repay him, the man said that Menon owed the debt not to him, but to any stranger who came to him in need, for as long as he lived. The help came from a stranger and was to be repaid to a stranger. Menon never forgot that debt. I think we call this paying it forward. Menon's daughter said that the day before Menon died, a beggar came to the family home asking for help to buy some new sandals, for his feet were covered with sores. Menon asked his daughter to take 15 rupees from his wallet to give to the man. It was Menon's last conscious act. Menon ministered to strangers because a stranger had ministered to him. It mattered not whether the stranger was worthy, it only mattered that the stranger was in need. Jesus did not separate the multitudes that were hungry into those who were worthy and those who were not worthy. He simply had the people sit down on the grass as he took some fish and some bread, blessed it, and gave it to them. Worthiness is never a requisite for ministry. You see, none of us are worthy when compared to God. And yet God sees all of us as worthy of His love, His support, His encouragement, sees us worthy of food, help, compassion, and mercy, and whatever else is necessary. The priest and the Levite should not have passed by the man, but like the Samaritan, should have stopped to help. You see, we get it all backwards. We say, I'll love my neighbor if I feel that there's a chance that my neighbor will love me, or if I judge him to be worthy. What we fail to see is that while we were unworthy, Christ died for us. That is the reason we love others, because Christ loved us first. That is why we Catholics run hospitals, nursing homes, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and the like. I ask, have you ever seen an atheist home for orphan children? Or any example of an agnostic hospital for the poor or indigent? Why have Christians been historically so charitable, so caring? Catholic Charities, St. Vincent de Paul, Catholic Relief Service, Knights of Columbus. It is because once we were lying beside the road, broken and bleeding, and nail-scarred hands reached down to us and ministered to us in our need. Now we seek to do the same for others. Besides, we have found that such a concern for others is our source of unlimited joy. Our Master himself put it like this: do this and you will live. I am sure that if those of you who have experienced Father Bill's priesthood more closely were giving this homily, you would have decided to mention all sorts of things and to give all sorts of examples of how Bill served you in your need. I know that just by the fact that so many of you from previous parishes are here today. I'm sorry we don't have time to hear all those stories of ministry. Over the past 25 years, I have often heard that Father Bill has been a priest of great kindness, love, and forgiveness, and on more than one occasion. When I met him at Mount Angel, I heard that he was a computer whiz. Later, I learned his specialty was Macintosh, not PC. Of course, I had a PC. Later, I bought a Mac so that Bill could help me when I got stuck, and that was often. He was the computer genius that I wasn't. He always helped me most generously. He also designed the computer-generated yearbook at the end of each school year. While Bill might not say this, I would say that his computer efforts were always a brilliant piece of work. Father Bill also was a very good student. I taught liturgical theology, and I often wondered if students were getting it. Did they get the liturgical precepts of the church? On one occasion, a few years back, I was coming back from California and decided to stop in Grants Pass, where Father Bill was the pastor, who had overseen the construction of the new St. Anne's Church. Bill was not home, but I managed to get into the new church building. I always find a way. I was deeply impressed and remember thinking to myself, I am proud of his teachers. They did a good job with his education. Of course, I was also proud with Father Bill. Bill, you built a beautiful place of worship for God. When I would give tests at the end of the semester, oftentimes they were oral exams, so I met with students one-on-one. And then I'd have time it, so I had one more class. And I remember one year I walked in to my class, my last class, and I said to them, "Boy, am I disappointed in your teacher," rather than them. Finally, to our guest of honor, I say, I have always thought of you as the epitome of kindness, Bill, the epitome of forgiveness, love, and have known you to be a great man of service. You have the spirit of VP Menon I referred to in today's homily. I am proud of what you have become and pray that it only gets better during the next 25 years. However, I don't promise to be around at your 50th. My friend, continue to love God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength, and your neighbor and your parishioners as yourself. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Father Bill on 25 years, and I would like you to join me in doing that. And as we say, Bill, ad multos annos, and that's it.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast, and a big thank you to Msgr Paperini, who gave the homily. I'm so appreciative for him giving up his time and talent to come, and I know he said he was surprised. And I'm like, well, I was thinking about who could do that, who could offer the homily. And I'm thinking, well, it's my anniversary that I'm celebrating. I kind of want to pray the Mass and not be stressed by a homily. I did give homilies previous in the day, but on this particular Mass, I wanted just to not do it that way and allow somebody else to give the homily. So he gracefully did so, and I'm very grateful. And of course, I want to thank all of you who are listeners. I want to thank my parishioners from all the different parishes I've been at for your support of me prayerfully or whatever it might be. Just give me attaboys and words of encouragement, or give me advice, or even sometimes correction. Sometimes, go off course, and I need to be given some guidance too as well. I just want to thank you for all of that. That is so important for me because I want to be the best priest I can, the best pastor I can, and then guide us towards, ultimately heaven, and myself included. So if any questions or comments, as always, I encourage you to go to my website, fatherbill.org. That's FRBILL.org. And there you can read my blog. You can listen to other podcasts, more episodes of this particular podcast. I have photos and videos, a Friday video I put out almost every Friday now, being here at Holy Trinity, and other things. So check it out, and may God bless you. Bye-bye.